All right, on these problems, we're going to be doing subtracting, which is the same as adding. The only difference will be um, in the fifth step that we already covered, we'll be doing subtraction rather than addition. And in these, you'll want to make sure you distribute your negative. So we'll factor both numerators, both denominators. We'll simplify the fractions if possible. We'll look for the least common denominator, so we'll try to make the fraction on the left look like the fraction on the right, and the fraction on the right look like the fraction on the left for the denominator. Then we'll make sure we adjust our numerators appropriately, do the subtraction of the numerators, and then if the new numerator factors, we'll need to factor that. Then we'll cancel any common factors and rewrite our final simplified fraction. So let's go ahead and try. Actually, let's just do. I'm just going to do 15 and 16 on the note sheet. Okay. So here, first step is going to be to factor both denominators. So looks like we've got two terms here. Does not appear that there's a greatest common factor, so we look for a difference as squares. They're both perfect squares, and it is subtraction. So this is going to factor into x minus 6 and x plus 6. And then we look at the next denominator, and here does not appear to be a greatest common factor. We have three terms, so that's going to have to be opposite of FOIL. And on this one, we're going to need factors of 6 for the last terms. And looking at the two denominators of the first one, since those are both 6's, there's probably a high probability we're going to use factors of 1 and 6 rather than 2 and 3, because usually there's already one of the factors that are common in the both. So let's go ahead, we'll put an x and an x. Let's try the 1 and the 6. And then let's see, is there, can you get a positive 5 out of a 6 and a 1 where the signs have to be opposites? And apparently you can, because you can use a positive 6 and a negative 1. And here, if we do the outers and the outers get us positive 6x, the inners get you a negative 1x, which do combine together to get you a positive 5x. The next step would be to simplify either fraction, but because we just have a 5 and a 9, none of those simplify. So now we're ready to make this denominator look like this denominator and this denominator look like that denominator. So apparently the first one here is missing an x minus 1, so we'll put an x minus 1 in the denominator here. And whenever you do the bottom, you must do the top. And on the second fraction, looks like we're missing a factor of x minus 6. And whenever you do the bottom, you must do the top. So now you'll notice that both denominators are identical. So now we're ready to combine them into one fraction. So we can write this over our new common denominator of x minus 1, x minus 6, and x plus 6. And then in the numerator here, we're going to need to distribute. So first numerator, we've got 5x minus 5. But in the second denominator, see how there's this subtraction here? This is actually a negative 9. That negative 9 needs to get distributed to both terms. So negative 9 times x is negative 9x, and negative 9 times negative 6 gets you a positive 54. And I will tell you, this is the most common mistake right here. Most people will make that a negative 64 rather than a positive 64. So now we're ready to combine up like terms. So 5x minus 9x is negative 4x, and negative 5 plus positive 54 gets you a positive 49. And then that's over your common denominator of x minus 1, x minus 6, x plus 6. Okay? And there is no common factors here for 49 and negative 4, and there's not an x in both. So this is your final simplified fraction. All right, let's do one more and then we'll be done here. In this one, let's check the denominators. We've got to factor those first. And apparently there is a common factor through all three of these terms. Looks like we can take out a 2. So if we take out a 2, you're left with 2m minus 7m plus 3. Okay, so that's that denominator. But then, oops, this is a squared here. But then this may factor. So let's go ahead and check to see if that's an opposite of FOIL. So first terms would need to be 2m and m. Then we need factors of 3, which are just 1 and 3. And in order to get to 7, looks like we're probably going to have to multiply that 2 and the 3 together. So let's try putting the 3 here and the 1 here. And since we end up with a positive 3 when we multiply, but a negative when we add, those looks like those are both going to be negative. Let's see if we end up with a 7m there. Your outer terms would be negative 6m. Your inner terms would be negative 1m, which do combine together to get you negative 7m. So apparently that's correct. So here is our final denominator on this one. On the second denominator, this one looks a little simpler. Doesn't appear to have a greatest common factor, so we'd have to do opposite of FOIL here. First term in each would be m and m. And then we need factors of 12 that get you 1. And apparently that would be a positive 4 and a negative 3. And now if we want to simplify any fractions. Again, this m plus 2 is an entire unit. So it doesn't appear that there's an m plus 2 on the bottom. But on the second one, here's an m plus 4, and there is an m plus 4 on the bottom, so we can go ahead and simplify that. Okay. So now we're ready to come up with a common denominator. And let's actually rewrite what we've got so far. We've got an m plus 2 over 2m minus 1 and m minus 3 minus 1 over m minus 3. So now, apparently, in order to make these look the same, this one's already got the m minus 3, but this one here is missing the 2 and the 2m minus 1, so this is going to need a 2 and a 2m minus 1. And whatever you do to the bottom, you need to do to the top. So we're going to need to multiply this 1 by a 2 and a 2m minus 1. Okay. So now we're ready for our common denominator. So our common denominator is 2m minus 1, and m minus 3. Here, not much to do with that numerator. We're just going to rewrite it as m plus 2. But over here, we have 2 times 1, which is just 2. But this isn't really a 2, it's a negative 2, and that needs to get distributed to both terms. So negative 2 times 2m gets you negative 4m, and negative 2 times negative 1 gets you a positive 2. Okay, so now we're ready to combine up like terms. So we've got m and negative 4m, which is negative 3m, and 2 plus 2, which is 4. And that's over your common denominator of 2m minus 1, and m minus 3. And we check to see if this can be factored. There's no common factor. It's definitely not a difference of squares. So this would be your final simplified fraction. And that'll complete that problem.